of the things we study in the life of Jesus is that there are many times, the most intimate moments that we see with Jesus and his Father, he is always alone. Probably the first one we notice is at the baptism, that Jesus is sort of away from the thing and is baptized by John, and we have this intimate thing with the Father. We notice that when Jesus is at the temptations. Remember, he puts the apostles aside, he's at the temptations. Remember, he gets away from the apostles for the transfiguration. If you remember at the healing of Peter's mother-in-law, when they went out to find Jesus, Jesus had gone off alone. And so this whole idea is ingrained in the experience of Jesus, but it is also ingrained in the Jewish scriptures. When you study the Jewish scriptures, you discover that God looks at the desert as being his honeymoon with the Jews. When he involved himself with the Jews, he took the Jews into the desert. They had absolutely nothing to do. God provided them food in the form of manna and would give them water. He told them when to move, when to camp, how long to stay. They had to do nothing but follow directions. And that is when they developed this really powerful thing with God. I think oftentimes religious people sort of daydream when they have a time when they can get away with nothing to do and somehow enter into this kind of relationship with God. People used to retreats and stuff for that. But this whole idea of somehow getting away. So, the desert removed distractions, and not just the evil distractions of the world, but things like commerce, the good distractions. There are many things in our world that are not evil, but are constantly distractions to us. Things that take our time, things that take our effort, all kinds of things that sort of draw on us that we can get away from. Okay? Many great saints came from this period. The most famous is Anthony. Anthony was the first of the Desert Fathers, and Anthony became a model for people. But there are serious problems with this form of life, and the church noticed it very early. The first is, it is easy to become, if we want to be polite, eccentric. If you want to be impolite, it's easy to become stark raving mad. Okay? And a remarkable number of these people it happened to. I'll give you an example of one, and he's a canonized saint. This man went out in the desert to be alone, got a great reputation for holiness. People would go out and get his advice and everything. His name's Simon. So he built himself a pillar with a platform on the top. He went up to the platform and lived there 60 years. No contact with people at all. They would, ferry food up to him on some kind of a pulley deal. I hope he's ferried things down to them. But anyway, he lived on the top of this. And it's very interesting. The church canonized him, a very holy man, St. Simon. But when they canonized him, they said, his life is worthy of admiration, but not imitation. Many people in these desert things became great saints, but a remarkable number of them lived lives that we would flat out call crazy. Flat out. So that's a danger. We know that's a danger. Anyone who lives alone, you deal with priests, you know that. Okay? Anyone who lives alone, there's always a danger you will be crazy. Okay? The second danger is it actually abandons Jesus' social teaching. Jesus taught us to care for one another. And so the whole area of Jesus' social teaching is lost. If we're alone, that is simply closed to us. And the third is that it was a life that was closed to women. If women went into the desert and tried and lived as hermits, they were extremely vulnerable. It was very dangerous for women. So this particular whole form of life was actually closed to women. And there are very few women in that period of the church who are known for that kind of life, because it was very, very dangerous for women. Now, when the church began to look at the problems with this kind of life virtually ended, and it ended shortly after Benedict. Tomorrow we're going to deal with St. Augustine, and the following day with Benedict. But this life, once Benedict got going, the church prohibited this life. It was flat out condemned. And over a period of time, it re-emerged as a part of Benedictine spirituality. And they found a very interesting thing. There are two basic ways you can live the eremitical life in the church today. And they're both branches of the Benedictine order. One of them is the Camaldolese. who are down at Big Sur. You each live in your own home, but there's things they do together, and their ministries they're involved in churches and stuff like that. So you basically have the eremitical life, but you avoid the craziness. And the second is the Carthusians. They're known in the United States as the Trappists. And the way the Trappists do it is they actually live in a community, but because of absolute silence, they isolate themselves that way. So they basically have their own hermit life while in a community. Okay? And then it began to work out. But initially, the way this was going, it tended to lead people to very, very crazy lives. Okay? The next spirituality I'd like to look at is St. Augustine. And with the exception of the last person, everyone I'm going to mention, there's a religious order that followed them. And the religious order that followed Augustine came about much later than Augustine. When I go through this thing about Augustine, you need to know that he came before Benedict, okay? And when we study Benedict, Benedict is the first one who came together with a rule for people actually to live together. And then Benedict, the rule, influenced other things and made them work. Augustine had a wonderful rule, but it perished with him. And it perished with him because of one of the basic, increments of this. The main thing for St. Augustine was friendship. It wasn't isolation from the world. The key thing to St. Augustine was friendship. I'd like to give you just a passage from Sirach, and this passage is very important to Augustine. It says, "A faithful friend is a sturdy shelter, and the one who finds one finds a treasure. A faithful friend is beyond price. No sum can balance his worth. A faithful friend is a life-saving remedy, such as anyone who fears God finds. For the one who fears God behaves accordingly and will find a friend like himself." Okay? St. Augustine, every one of these people whose backgrounds we know, their spirituality is developed by their background. St. Augustine had a background we will describe as colorful, and he had a series of girlfriends, but his experience of these young ladies is, number one, his involvement with them was absolutely intense, and his involvement with them was life-changing. Incidentally, life-changing for his good. The problem that St. Augustine saw with those relationships was it was out of sexual order with regards to the teachings of the church. But the impact of those women on Augustine was actually very good. They civilized him and made him the type of person he really was. So the influence was very good, and St. Augustine remembered that. So when St. Augustine went through his conversion, he decided to build a spirituality, and his spirituality was built on friendship because of the intensity and the transforming nature of his friendship. He was very, very aware of the benefits of leaving the world, and simultaneously he was very, very aware of the problems and dangers of the eremitical life. So what he decided is we need to live in a group away from the world, and this group of people must all be dedicated to the church. Okay? This needs to be a group of Catholic people very involved with the church who move out of the world as a group. And that way we shouldn't have all the problems we do in a person who just simply leaves the world. St. Augustine developed a very close community of extremely close friends. In his community, there were men and there were women, and there were both married and single people. The one thing that united them was every one of them had an intense personal relationship with St. Augustine. You could not enter the group unless you were really accepted by everyone in the group. An example would be, if I wanted to join their community, I would go and live with them for a couple of years, and then they would vote on whether or not I should go in the community. One negative vote, you don't enter the community. And you could stay for many years, maybe have the vote 2 or 3 times, but at the end of a certain period, you could no longer be a member of the community. Eventually, the church developed what are called auxiliaries or tertiaries. And in a monastic community today, you have the monastic community,